Okay, so in this tutorial, I want to explore how to create minimal industrial 3D designs that borrow from the military aesthetic. Now, looking at some of the military hardware on screen right now, a few things will probably pop out immediately. So for example, here we see matte materials. Here you'll see exposed construction lines, these visible seams here, and you'll even see things like exposed bolts. Essentially, nothing here is hidden or disguised. You'll also notice a lot of hard edges throughout these designs and almost a strictly monochromatic color palette. Now we're going to break down all of these design elements in a moment, but first I just want to show you what I've been working on in Lightloop because I'm actually using this process right now to design a military inspired housing or casing for my Arduino. Now this project is going to be living outside in some pretty harsh conditions, so I wanted the housing to physically communicate the kind of strength required to survive in that environment. And that's exactly why I'm pulling from the military aesthetic. So here's an example where I've prompted Lightloop to apply minimalistic military design standards, and you can see it's already pulling in this nice matte black finish here. Here we have these nice hard edges. Here are some exposed lines, and it's even added some ventilation here for cooling. Now, I'll obviously need to resize everything in my CAD software later, but at this stage, I'm purely in idea mode. Also, for context, here's my current Arduino design. As you can see here, it's functional. It has these support structures. I have these openings here for the wire connectors. Here in the front, I've added the inputs, but honestly, this entire design is a little vanilla for my liking. So I'm looking to create something that looks like it was meant to exist in some pretty harsh environments. So in Lightloop, I just begin the ideation phase by generating ideas freely without worrying too much about direction. If the AI interprets my prompts too literally early on, that's fine with me. At this stage, I'm simply trying to expand my understanding of what the design could be. So for example, I prompted Lightloop to generate World War II bomber-inspired designs for me, using the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress as a reference. The results, as you can see early on here at least, were quite literal, but what I find valuable about this process is that it reveals how the AI is thinking. So these small openings here, which I could repurpose as cooling vents, are actually derived from the bomber's windows. And for me anyway, that's an interesting connection, even if the overall design doesn't really do it for me. Now, what I appreciate about these outputs, even the unusable ones like this here, is that they get my creative juices flowing. They introduce new ways of thinking about the design, and they challenge my assumptions, even assumptions that I don't realize myself that I'm making. So for example, take this cockpit, for instance. Now, World War II bombers have these sharply angled cockpit profiles, and that got me thinking, what if I angled the Arduino within its housing? My default assumption here was that the board would lie flat because that's how I've always seen it done. But there's no reason why it couldn't sit at a 45-degree angle, or there's no reason why it couldn't even be placed vertically within the platform here. So these designs remind me that conventions shouldn't be confused with constraints. So even when the AI goes in the wrong direction, there's still value in that detour. Or here, as you can see, is another one of my detours. Here, for example, I was experimenting with some more vintage prompts and exploring the materials drop down within Lightloop. Now, a few of these variations turned out quite nicely and sparked some ideas around how to approach the design of the main casing, and others I didn't really like that much. But the concepts down here essentially highlight the appeal of flat, minimalist surfaces, while the ones up here show how the Arduino housing might look if I offset the faces instead. Now, at this stage, I'm still purely in ideation, so this is really just about generating as many directions as possible. So strictly from an ideation standpoint, I think I have a lot to work with here. So those are some examples of how I've used the military aesthetic to build a strong industrial look for my Arduino case. But how do you actually prompt engineer for the best results in Lightloop if you want to go in this direction? Well, in my opinion, the best starting point is to study the military aesthetic itself. This way you actually understand what's driving the design language underneath here. From there, you can just pick and choose the specific elements that you want to carry into your own work. Now, I've done some of that research myself, and here are a few of the key takeaways from my observations. So first, military hardware almost universally defaults to sharp angular geometry. Take the F-22 Raptor or the Comanche, for example. Yes, aerodynamics obviously has to play a role here, but there are still these very strong, deliberate lines throughout these designs. Now, the visual result is something that feels very intentional and very, very loaded with energy. We see the same principle at work here in my Lightloop design. So notice here how the sharp edges and angles give this design a confident, powerful presence. Now compare that to this version with softer edges. It really doesn't command attention in the same way, in my opinion. This rounded design is still really beautiful, but it just reads as softer, more neutral, and more approachable. And at the end of the day, what you're going to notice is that diagonal lines and hard edges just communicate confidence and forward motion. I think the best way to think about this is kind of like Lamborghini versus Honda. That's exactly what's playing out across these designs here. So another thing to think about here is that civilian design tends to hide its construction. So for example, you'll see things like a lot of smooth surfaces, hidden fasteners, and seamless joints, where military design does the exact opposite. So for example, panels will be visible, bolts pop out, and seams are visible on almost all surfaces. Now, if you were to look closely at virtually any ship, tank, or plane, you'll find hairline gaps between armor plates, connector ports, rivet lines, and none of this is being concealed, and not concealing it is a very intentional choice. Now, these details create rhythm and scale across the surface. They break up mass without weakening it visually, and they give the eye somewhere to travel. Now, there's also something deeper going on here. Now, this kind of honesty creates an immediate sense of substance and trust. When you can see how something is held together, it subconsciously tells you that it is held together. For product designers, exposed construction and controlled seam lines are one of the most underused tools available. Now, some might argue that exposing your construction signals a lack of refinement, but military designers would push back hard on that. For them, showing how something is built is the most confident design statement that they can make. So back in Lightloop, you can see some of that exposed construction coming through here, in these visible panels, these seams, these surface bolts. So if you're going for this aesthetic, remember, sometimes exposing your construction is exactly what makes a product feel more substantial and authentic. Now, another hallmark of military design is its narrow color palette. Think matte black, olive drab, desert tan, or gunmetal gray. Now, the result is that form, not color, does all the work. Now, this is an incredibly disciplined approach and plays out across pretty much all of the demo projects that I created for this tutorial over in Lightloop here. Almost everything is matte black or gray metal. What this tells us is that stripping away color forces you to get the shape right. Also, monochromes tend to read as serious, premium, and timeless. Now, another pattern you'll notice is that military hardware almost always avoids reflective surfaces because shine gives position away. The result is that matte finishes dominate in the military design standard. Now, if we were to jump back into Lightloop, you'll see that virtually all of these designs carry a matte finish, which gives them that weighty, timeless quality. It's also worth noting that in Lightloop, you can control this directly within the prompt optimization tool. For these designs, I selected the matte option here, but as you can see, I could have selected glossy, pebbled, brushed, and any other finish that is available in this dropdown as well. Now, another thing that you'll notice with military hardware is that it doesn't decorate or over-decorate its surfaces. Instead, as you'll see here, it tends to articulate them instead. The lines you see on a fighter jet or destroyer aren't styling, they tend to be things like panel breaks, stress lines, and drainage channels. The result is a surface language that feels purposeful and technical without being busy or overly decorative. Now, I think the lesson here for designers is that a few clean, deliberate lines on a surface do more than 100 decorative details. Now, the next one is a subtler detail, but look closely at any military vehicle or aircraft and you'll find a quiet typographic system at work here. So you'll see small stenciled numbers, unit markings, warning labels, measurement indicators, and so on. Now, none of this typography is loud, but all of it's there. It creates this layer of detail that rewards closer inspection and makes the object feel like it belongs to a larger system or some type of platform. For product designers, the takeaway here is that restrained technical typography, small part numbers, fine print specifications, and things like minimal badging all add up and help create a sense of authenticity and depth without competing with the form. Now, finally, military hardware defaults to materials that perform, so things like hardened steel, anodized aluminum, ballistic polymers, vulcanized rubber, and so on. Now, these materials are rarely disguised or imitated. You won't find fake metal finishes on a Humvee, for example. That material honesty is a big part of what makes military design feel so credible. For product designers, the lesson here is pretty straightforward. Using real materials, or at a minimum being transparent about what the material actually is, communicates integrity in a way that surface finishes or paint can never quite do. Now, when all of these design elements combine, they produce something genuinely compelling and often quite beautiful. The designs look to be strong and rugged, of course, but there's also something deeper going on, more than just pure toughness. I think these machines look consequential, like objects that exist for a reason, built to be trusted under pressure. And that's exactly the kind of design thinking that Lightloop is built to help you explore. So if you're a product designer, engineer, or just someone who wants to start bringing products to life, then Lightloop is our AI-powered product ideation platform that takes you from rough concept to CAD-ready visual without the usual friction. Now, as you saw today, you could just type out a product description within the platform here and then get a polished visual, video, or 3D model right away. Or what you could do is you could just sketch something on a rough piece of paper or a napkin, for example, and then you could turn that into a presentation-ready concept within a matter of seconds. So if you're interested, a link to Lightloop can be found below. Thanks for stopping by today.